There's a historical corollary here. We've talked a lot about this economic recession as being the worst since the Great Depression. And if we think about FDR's programs, which were certainly much more aggressive than anything that we see now, but it had many of the same kinds of failings when we look back at how once these incentives were sent to the states, and particularly what were the post-Confederate states during that time, that you could look and see very clearly that states were making racialized choices and urban versus rural choices about how they were spending that money. My colleague at Columbia University, Ira Katznelson, has this terrific book, When Affirmative Action Was White, which talks about how the whole creation of the middle class that emerges in the post-Depression era, the post-World War II era, actively shuts out whole communities from participating in these federalized incentives programs for work, for human capital investment through education, through housing, that because there were not specific safeguards around race, that states, of course, made deeply racially biased choices.
We've had Kim Crenshaw on this program, also Columbia, talking about the implications of that or the legacy of that in the foreclosure crisis that we saw. What if things had been different then, do you think, Melissa? And then Judith, I'd love to talk about what actually could be different now. What if they hadn't made those, what if they had done some of the racially conscious programming or policy making that wasn't done?
Well, the single most important thing is, of course, that what we've seen since the 1940s is, in fact, an important narrowing of the income gap, but enormous growing of the wealth gap. That because there was an investment that provided initial wealth investment for white communities, that you look at it now and you'll see that, in fact, median white families have about 11 times the wealth of median black families. What that means is when an economic downturn hits, you don't have to eat your house if you have some assets. You have the capacity to live through medical crisis or family downturns or divorces. But when you have really no cushion, no wealth cushion, and that's a wealth cushion that goes back, that gap all the way back to the efforts of the New Deal and the Great Society, that those efforts not being, or simply being race neutral and not being aggressive on questions of race, meant that when this economic downturn hit, black families were particularly vulnerable.